The mercenary, Charles Mormont, had no idea where he was headed. Lyle, the manager of a woodshop in Edora, could not answer his question, and Grit, an antique shop worker in Galcia, was completely sobbing from a loss of memory. In their circle were Jenna, who lived in a remote forest, and Khan Islat, a farmer, who also knew nothing. It turned out that all 11 people had no idea how they ended up in this place. Moreover, it didn't feel like a dream. The harvest time has come, and a fierce dispute has arisen between the men who dragged them here. The assumptions fell on a magician who was preparing some kind of experiment. To some this seemed stupid, but one thing was clear for sure. All those present were residents of Taonia. If they continue to get to know each other, they may stumble upon an important clue. They were taken by surprise by the unexpected appearance of the fairy steward, Izel, who recommended that they form a column if they did not want to get hurt. As it turns out, it was the mini-sorceress who kidnapped them. Charles Mormont sharply reached for his sword, deciding to teach the culprit a lesson, but this did not frighten her at all. On the contrary, Izel warned that the man could be left without a head if he behaved in the same impudent manner. The mercenary, who wished to play the role of an etiquette teacher, returned to the arms of the goddess. The system dictated that his fighting spirit would be remembered forever, and the cause of death was self-destruction due to stress. Izel warned him about this outcome. Now the fairy was hinting to others too. Anyone who raises a hand against her is a corpse. People began to sound the alarm, causing the hall to be filled with screams of horror. They were ordered to listen to instruction, fight honorably, and win, which was quite easy. There followed a notification about the formation of a detachment and the shuffling of heroes. This meant that the gentlemen began to act, and Izel opened the gap. She invited Lyle, Lanto, Marilyn, Kelkud and Jackson, who looked in horror at the pixelated entrance. She was called out by Khan Islat, who asked to equip them with weapons. The squad looked like a bunch of harmless one-star, so it was in the interests of the master and this fairy to keep the participants alive. Moreover, a 2-star hero had just died. Agreeing with him, the sorceress notified her boss about the problem, after which a message followed that the heroes should go to the armory to equip themselves. Some people recognized Khan and asked him if he knew anything about this place. Unfortunately, the guy didn't collect information because he didn't intend to stick around. However, he gave advice: do not hesitate. Soon, they will have to begin the battle. Having said that, Khan put everyone on their ears because there were those who had never fought with anyone in their entire life, and while the fighters took away each other's weapons, the body of the deceased hero disappeared. However, time was running out, and they were ordered to go through the passage. The portal threw electric charges that frightened the participants who were breaking the comedy. Jenna closely watched the actions of the farmer inspecting the shield. She had the impression that this Khan knew much more than he was saying, so she wanted to ask a couple of questions. He shared that the heroes will have to enter the arena and defeat all enemies, and then everything will be clear. After a while, another fighter returned to the arms of the goddess, Marilyn, and after him, Kelkud, Lanto, Jackson, and Lyle. Thus, the first detachment was completely destroyed, even on the first floor. Izel was furious at the mere thought of their weakness, while Khan analyzed the possible reasons for the loss. The shuffling of the heroes began again, where Khan and Jenna and the others entered. The fairy lost hope until the old man told her about his arthritis. Her little body began to pound, but Jenna took charge in her place and dragged the man towards the portal. It seemed that only Khan knew what was coming. There was not a shadow of fear on his face. Having crossed the threshold, the team members appeared in the main dungeon of the first floor. Participants will have to conquer the tower and save the world. When the gates began to open, Khan gave the order to stay close to each other, after which they were transported to a wasteland, and the goblins of the third level appeared as enemies. If the heroes do not fight, they will die. However, no one except Jenna listened to him anymore. Because of fear, the girl's characteristics decreased by 30%, which subsequently happened to the others. As a result, the trio of cowards stumbled upon a barrier. There was only one way out: to fight. Luckily, Jenna's father was a hunter, so she knew how to shoot a bow. Khan will fight on the front lines, while others are busy saving their own skin. They were useless now. In fact, the guy didn't even wield a sword or shield. Khan Islat, although his real name is Khan Sajin, ended up in a random game like these losers. Choose Me. That was the name of the mobile game created by the studio Mobius Corp. The goal was to conquer a tower consisting of hundreds of levels, while helping the heroes obtain resources defenses and set up a base camp. It was necessary to clear the tower using tactics and strategy. Just yesterday, Khan lived as usual, looking at the smartphone screen and being interested in a new event. Ranks ranged from 1 star to 7 star. By the way, the main character was a real loser. Even after using thousands of free summons, he never got a character above 5 stars. In the dungeon, the Book of Reversal of Fate, necessary to create a 7-star hero, dropped out with a small percentage. For this reason, Khan decided to participate. The game had strict rule. No matter how much work was put into a character, after death he could not be resurrected. Completing the dungeon as part of a one-time team is a prerequisite. Khan tried out the new event, not understanding what his heroes were afraid of, although he simply needed to learn the patterns of the boss. He followed the system messages until he noticed a shadow with level 999. In the end, he failed to win. This seemed like a system error to him, especially since all the players were erased. The next thing that flashed through his mind was a sinister smile. The game should have ended, but the impenetrable darkness was replaced by system prompts. Except Khan didn't even type. His name was chosen on its own, and then a brief excursion into his fictional life followed. An unknown enemy invaded this peaceful region, and he, Khan Islat, had to climb to the top of the tower to save the world. Many heroes will accompany him. The training task was a duel with goblins. Now, everything was real. Realization came very soon. The battle began automatically, and Khan, with difficulty, repelled the attack of the monster. The thought of killing another creature could not fit into my head, but the stage was passed. His level increased, and the environment inside the game seemed painfully familiar. The system gave the following instruction: find an ally. Of course, at first it was difficult to get used to, especially when the flow of new information did not stop. But, nevertheless, Master Whatever managed to get the super rare hero Shay. Did this mean that he came to this world just like the hero the user summoned? The girl became interested in Seijin's personality, noting how strange his name was. The system united Han and Shay into a team. Their master Whatever again threw the guys into the dungeon, but fortunately, Shay did an excellent job with the attack, taking on even part of her partner, who didn't even have a uniform. The girl defeated 5 goblins in the blink of an eye, thanks to which the stage was completed and Shay's level increased to 5 stars. Well, this is a colossal difference in skill. Khan did not complain, but this did not reduce the problem. The master successfully completed the battle, which means the last stage of training remained. The user chose Fusion as a hero boost, which the main character was clearly not happy. At that moment, Ezel appeared. She was surprised that the guy in front of her was not Khan Islat, but Khan Seijin. Moreover, he was different from the image in the photograph. Even the biography was different. The fairy was losing patience, but insisted that the hero enter. She promised that he would not die if he murdered, although it was hard to believe. In the end, Ezel simply pushed him inside. The master began a merger, strengthening by combining 2 heroes. One of them was used as a sacrifice to increase the performance of another fighter. During this action, one will inevitably be destroyed, but a normal player wouldn't have the desire to specifically save Khan and destroy Shay, so it seemed crazy. The user made a choice in favor of Seijin. Shay began to dissolve in the rays of light, and therefore she left all the responsibilities to her partner. In the real fight, things were not so sweet. One of the team members died, and Jenna let her guard down, calling on the cowards to unite. In any case, Khan survived. To synthesize heroes, drag and drop was used, built in such a way that the user dragged the sacrificed character onto another. The main character was lucky, but Shay ended up disappearing due to the master's stupid mistake. Jenna did a great job with 1 goblin, but Khan, he knew it himself, how he ended up in Choose Me. But it was clear that Khan Seijin was summoned as a 1-star hero, Khan Islat. At the moment of transition to this world, that level 9999 monster laughed. Is it his fault? However, the hero himself convinced himself, except the monster messed with the wrong guy. Khan and Jenna finished off all opponents, but the man's hand was severely wounded. Players had minimal influence on the course of battle in the game. This was due to the fact that most battles were completed automatically by the hero, but even so, the game had 100 million players worldwide. The reason was the ability to observe the world like God. Khan was also a player who liked pick-me, crafting items, strategy and tactics, developing heroes and discovering hidden capabilities. Despite all the difficulties, there was was no point in giving up. Fifth place in the world belonged to Loki. He just had to watch how the main character was going to survive. Only Han and Jenna survived this battle. The main character had already come to terms with his situation, so he motivated himself to get rid of the child's behavior. Now he was inside the game, where he was reborn and summoned as a one-star character. The player had only two ways to die: death in combat and synthesis. One-star ones were considered useless dummies due to terrible characteristics and low-level growth rate. Khan had to become stronger, survive, take revenge, and return. All this is impossible if he does not take the first step. However, he had no idea how life would turn out next, but he would die if he did not adapt. If he fails to accept the rules, he will be eaten. It was not enough to have physical strength. He also had to change mentally. If Khan starts to get nervous, all his efforts will be nullified. Before this, he managed to survive alone. There were no parents or anyone who could protect him, but he managed to do it on his own. Khan tried to remember that anxiety for the sake of the effectiveness of his training. Jenna just caught him with one. She spent the whole night thinking about what she had to do next, realizing that they would not be able to get out of this hell. Since her father was a hunter, in her free time, the girl practiced archery. For this reason, she had no intention of becoming a hindrance. Moreover, if something changes, Jenna won't just sit and cry, especially when there was a person nearby who knew the secret of survival. Khan learned that this was her first real battle and that the heroine was unskillful with a bow. After yesterday's battle, her stats increased by 4. If so, then her growth rate was low, but the skill was necessary. Even being inexperienced, Jenna tested herself in her first real fight. She didn't look like she was backed into a corner and clearly had an idea of what she wanted to do next. The girl is a real find. Khan agreed to help. The girl's father often said that in order to get out, she had to follow a strong man. For this reason, Jenna shook his hand. The system notified the main character that the girl liked him, thanks to which a friendship bonus was added. This was a little alarming. Khan called Izel, who, being painfully busy, appeared very quickly. Without even hearing what the man had to say, she immediately refused to answer his question. On the contrary, the fairy urged him to climb the tower. However, that didn't stop him from asking about the fact that he was the only one who saw the status bar. Izel pretended not to understand, but Khan told her level. Seeing her reaction, the protagonist's confidence only grew stronger. He was the only one who could see game messages and notifications for the master, so he was curious what they would have to do if the master quit the game. Be that as it may, Faisal herself prayed that he would not do this. What happened when Master Whatever tried to unite Han and Shay was no ordinary accident. The chance of getting a 4-star hero in a free summon was 1%. Meaning luck was wasted due to a bad choice. It was impossible to simply reset the game because it was tied to the phone, and a whole week had already passed since entering Choose Me. Does time pass in this world the way it does on Earth? Izel became angry once again, refusing to answer. However, Han considered this a kind of hint, which made the fairy even more furious. She couldn't even touch him, even though she had the opportunity to intervene in case of self-defense, or when the hero rejected the master's orders. Seijin had to learn all the rules, because otherwise he would die. This is the only law of this world. Khan shared with Jenna that a certain master gave them orders through Izel. By obeying her, they will be able to get free, which means they will have to constantly fight monsters. The owner could use money for reinforcement, but now every choice will determine the fate of a hero. Their lives depended on the master's choice. After one day of training, Seijin learned a funny principle of this world. The next day, supplies of food and everything necessary were replenished. That is, if the main character thought about the necessary things, then they appeared every other day in a drawer or closet. Obviously, weapons were not included in this list. There were also various rules regarding the benefits of training. Things he didn't understand when he played Choose Me now made sense. Often, heroes of the same rank had completely different combat abilities. However, they had one thing in common: they were never lazy in training. Classes did not increase stats or level, but they did provide skills and improve abilities. The experienced master classified his main characters into 3 categories. The first, according to mental impact, that is, he will never look at heroes who panic easily. The second category is based on skills, that is, heroes of high rank were summoned with skills, while most characters of no rank had talents hidden from the master. The third is based on physique. This is what the main character was working on now. It's been 3 days since he started training. The master joined the game when Khan had already managed to obtain 2 skills. The owner began calling for a new hero since the team was supposed to consist of 5 people. This means he will use 3 tries. The first to fall was Aaron, the next was Toby, and the last was Jelson. Jenna drew their attention to herself, saying that they were in for a fight. Her parting words accompanied the opening of a temporary rift. Khan and his partner followed the old pattern, while the system offered equipment for newcomers. Since everyone died in the weapon last time, the guys had nothing left to spare. The newly arrived players rebelled at the sight of Isel, demanding that she return them. What a mistake they made. Jenna created extra work when she tried to help them, but they will soon find out for themselves. The only thing they didn't have to do was touch the fairy. Still, this trio ended up on the 2nd floor of the main dungeon. This time, the goal was cleanup. A second later, the 5 were moved onto the battlefield, causing Jenna and Khan to immediately prepare for an external attack. Goal kept us company with mountain wolves. As expected, the newcomers huddled in a corner out of fear. However, the girl's characteristics also decreased. Khan joked that she had eaten something bad and pushed her slightly, which greatly frightened her. He asked her to take charge of the 2 goblins while he had fun with the wolf. Jenna was no longer afraid. Compared to her, none of the newcomers will be of any use, so they are alone again in this fight. The monsters began to run on the offensive. The main character's goal turned out to be difficult, or his weapon became worthless. Fortunately, after trying out a new technique, Khan managed to eliminate the first enemy. Moreover, he managed to repel the attack of another wolf, hitting him with his shield. The main character has significantly increased his strength since he tore the 3rd one to pieces. In a moment, Khan remembered about the goblins, but Jenna successfully turned them into hedgehogs. Now we could stop. The guys passed the floor, for which their levels increased again. All 5 returned to the main dungeon to congratulations on clearing the 2nd floor, except they were immediately promoted to 3rd. Khan believed that the reckless master could immediately throw his players into clearing the next stage. But if this happens, then that trio may not survive. As a result, the master chose a different path. He disconnected. Isel suddenly appeared in front of the main character, pretending to be tired. Han did not attach any importance to this, since his head was occupied with another issue. What if the master could only walk 1 floor a day? If time passed here 3 times longer than in the waiting room, then he would have to connect in 3 days. The guy noted that his intelligence decreased by 1 point, and his strength increased by 2. The total bet still increased by 4 value, but the pumping efficiency still increased, and the increased power is proof of this. The master also took his time with the passage. If Han had remained as he was on the 1st floor, he would have put everyone in danger. The newcomers loaded Jenna with questions. Such 1-star people lived far from battle. They didn't even hold weapons in their hands. The main character became convinced of the reason why they were considered trash. Charles Mormont said that he was a mercenary, which means that the more combat-oriented the profession, the higher the star when recruited. High-class mercenaries did not panic without reason. If you throw a freshly summoned 1-star fighter into battle, he will constantly panic. So is it really possible that advanced characters are called upon, having previously been introduced to the course, and they knew their task in advance? Now Khan guessed about Shay's knowledge. Finally, Jenna broke away from the annoying weaklings, but they had to persuade them to fight and become allies. Although they will soon disappear anyway, it's not that they will die in battle. If they don't change, they will disappear. Khan was in the mood for a fight only in tandem with a girl, so such garbage did not even arouse his interest. These guys hid behind them while they shed blood, so the main character did not spare the blow. The next day, training continued. After the basic exercises, Han and Jenna began to use weapons, but nevertheless, the man was simply swinging a sword, and his partner was shooting from a bow. Those 3 never showed up to the training field. They walked here and there looking for a way out, wailing that they had left this place, but apparently they never found it. Han was injured as a result of Jenna's mistake. Fortunately, the laws of nature worked differently here than in the real world, and wounds healed faster. The main character did not stop, considering pain a good incentive. After all, this proved that he was alive. As a result, Khan gained some skills and increased some of his characteristics. The master launched the game, and right away, Isel began building characters in the square. Jenna was glad that the training would finally end, and they would do something else. She seemed to adapt faster than Han. However, the girl was made from a different cloth, and again, the newcomers began to rebel and demand from the fairy that she return them home. Of course, no one wanted to fight, but Isel could not keep her anger under control. She probably didn't even try. The heroine gave everyone a thrashing, but from now on, they will listen to her. On the third floor, the opponents were still the same goblin, but their equipment and tactics had noticeably improved. Khan decided to fight the same way as in training and rushed to the front line. The floor was successfully completed. Jenna noticed that she was starting to succeed because this time it was even boring. By the way, those three were not going to fight any further. However, it didn't matter. Han didn't want to share the experience with the likes of them anyway. The system advised the master to spin the Wheel of Fortune if the heroes disobeyed. In the end, he chose to go through the first floor again. Komarov instantly teleported to a new location where the monsters were no different from those that Jenna and Khan had already seen before. Due to the fact that the guys coped quickly, the master did not give them time to rest. The partners, despite being tired, still reached the third floor, and it drove me crazy. How much longer did they have to take care of these people? The main character reassured Jenna, deciding that everything should have ended today. The girl objected how this could happen, but the master was not rich enough to support these slackers. The owner began the synthesis and dragged the characters he wanted to sacrifice. The sacrificial one ceased to exist, so Khan mentally said goodbye to those who did not grab the opportunity. And if you think about it, there were quite a lot of these chances. Even if little things were not shown on the screen, the master was still aware of what was happening. He knew who was fighting on the front line, who was actively participating, and who was slacking off. As a result, Han and Jenna were added to favorites. Isel asked the girl to go into the synthesis room. The main character assured her not to be afraid, since nothing bad would happen to her. The newcomer tried to find out what was waiting for him inside. Everything depended on what he did, which means that the man will get what he deserves for his idleness. If he had pretended to fight, then everything could have gone differently. As expected, the master chose him as a sacrifice. Jenna's level has increased, and the number of skills has expanded. However, the girl herself did not understand what happened. She only remembered how that guy turned into light and disappeared. Khan explained that in this place, the useless were used as fuel. It was his turn. The other newcomer was visibly nervous, but continued to believe that he was going to be sent home. How wrong this optimist was. The main character was lucky enough to acquire the cold blood skill. Leaving the synthesis room, he congratulated the survivor on his success. Meanwhile, Jenna learned that the master could remove some useless player. Her body trembled with the realization that the fate of her former partners could await her too. Khan reassured her by saying that the level increase was accompanied by an increase in the strength of the monsters and players they had yet to face. As a result, the guys can die either at the hands of enemies or as victim. If Jenna wanted to live, then she should have listened to the instructions of her father, who gave advice to stick to strong people. The next day, the girl decided to get closer to Khan. However, this was unnecessary. She just had to be diligent, which could save her life. Unexpectedly, the third team member also expressed a desire to become stronger. He asked for forgiveness for his behavior that caused problems earlier. The newcomer realized that he had shown cowardice in trusting himself, that he had changed. To prove it, he was even ready to kneel. Jenna was happy about this outcome, but Khan asked if he had ever fought monsters. The main character, too, had never encountered anyone until he came to this world. The difference was the determination to win the fight and the desire to survive. Khan handed his partner a spear, which was the easiest to master. Sword, spear and bow were the basics of distance, and now that there were 3 of them, this distribution would be the most effective. Seijin challenged the man to a fight, thus deciding to show him at least a couple of techniques. However, Aaron will have to learn on his own. He was even lucky that he found an opponent to fight with, although Khan himself was only stuffed. The character closed his eyes and swung. This was his mistake. If there had been a real monster in the place of the main character, the guy would have died already. Jenna was worried that her partner had gone a little overboard for the first time. However, he himself was understandable. Han didn't want to care about anyone else, so if there was any interference, he would leave the guy behind. Aaron had a younger sister, so he could only imagine what would happen to her if he didn't return. Dying at the hands of a monster would be terribly painful, much more painful than being a victim in the fusion, so he could have just given up and not continued. The verbal beating increased his willpower, and his eyes lit up. The master built a forge because Khan unlocked a free space. the guy called Ezel, who was indignant at his impudence every time. As expected, he himself was beginning to get tired of her repertoire. Khan suggested that whatever received advice from her, and therefore just go online. If the fairy interacted with the system, then she had access to it. His guesses turned out to be true, since surfing the internet was her hobby. The advice Ezel sent was basic. The first level of training fields opened after summoning equipment 10 times, after which came the forge. Han learned this from one of Loki's posts, a user of Choose Me. The fairy was convinced that he was one of those who sat on the lower floors, since Mr. Loki was the master of masters. The user would definitely become the first in the world if he had a 7-star hero. He was the one who made the impossible, except she had no idea that Loki was standing in front of her. Ezel considered this an absurd bluff until Khan named the account number, which, due to the threat of hacking, was known only to the master himself and official technical support. If the girl didn't believe it, she could check it herself. Of course, it seemed pointless. However, forgetting about embarrassment, the fairy threw away his autograph. With him, she could become a VIP member of Ranga Loki, a cafe. Taken aback, the mini-sorceress remembered all the nasty things she had said to her idol. However, he was now a 1-star hero, so no one cared about her rudeness. Now she wondered what would happen to Niflheim without him. This is the so-called waiting room in his account. The building consisted of 13 floors, where there was nothing but waiting rooms. Capacity was 20,000 people, although most of the facilities were the best possible for level 1822 infrastructure. But what was the point of all this if the real master was here? Ezel clutched her head at the thought of what could have happened to 20,000 soldiers. However, if she was really worried about this, then why couldn't she send Loki back? Khan knew that the fairy was just an intermediary carrying out minor tasks. In any case, the owner of the waiting room, Wativa, was a human from Earth, and the heroes summoned are not AI at all. Even here he was right. This child world was a little different, but all the characters were human. The master did not know that they were alive, since he himself was a fan of Chusumi. The heroes faced all sorts of difficulties just to entertain him, but the most important thing was, could Loki return to Earth if he climbed to the 100th floor of the tower? Ezel didn't know the answer to this, so Khan asked who put it there. Even here she remained silent. The main character was curious how many master powers were available to the fairy. At least here she could at least say something. At the moment, Ezel could give advice, open and close objects, and help with autonomous work. She also added that each waiting room was a little different, but overall, they were all the same. Is it possible that there were 100 million such worlds? Mobius summoning, a system that created a limitless number of heroes by mixing thousands of patterns, was a complete lie. The hero, perceived as an AI, was actually a real person. Did this mean that the system that created limitless amounts of content also had 100 million individual worlds? All these worlds inside the game were real and in another world. Could Khan's rash decisions really lead to the death of the hero? Loki asked Ezel to listen to him carefully, because this way they both would be able to conquer the tower. Jenna was a true genius. Her speed was incomparable to other 1-stars, although the girl had never held a dagger before. But even so, she managed to master it. Aaron, on the contrary, was slow. At this rate, he will die sooner or later. The girl fought him with less than full strength, but the newcomer still turned out to be not so capable. Khan asked her to stop arrogance, leading her away. At that moment, she met with an angry Ezel who called herself the protagonist's best subordinate. An argument broke out between them, but Khan stopped the lively fairy in time. For a moment, he even decided that he had made a mistake by revealing his identity. Han confided to his partner that Ezel was a little out of her mind. Previously, she said that she had some rights to the vault, so Loki is scared to open it. Next in line was the Forgy. Khan admitted that he could not use the old iron sword forever. After talking with Ezel, he came to the conclusion that he was half master and half hero, and if this is true, then an invasion of the territory is possible, which only a master can do. The fairy was curious about what he wanted to create, but the likelihood of success was negligible due to the lack of an artisan and drawings. The system offered to select the difficulty of the puzzle. Khan decided on a nightmare, without fear of a triple fine. The sorceress could only watch the minigame that only masters played. Most people didn't do this, but the reward was worth it. A 3-minute limit was set and the countdown began. Ezel recognized the legendary Thousand Hands. The main character achieved tremendous success and created a well-forged C-rank sword. Incredible success followed, and Khan generated a balanced bow and then a spear and shield, all from rank. Unfortunately, he could not improve with such materials, but if there were more items, it would be noticeable. Khan didn't want the master to have unnecessary suspicions. On the battlefield, Jenna has already tried out new weapons. As a result, the clearing of the 4th floor was very successful. It even scared her that people who came later could steal such a high-quality onion. Although this shouldn't have happened if the girl was using the sidearm function, the master went too far, forcing them to attack with just the 3 of them. The main character left the harpies to his partner and ordered Eren to protect Jenna, obviously, but this brat got overexcited, causing his stats to drop. The girl tried to bring his feeling with one slap in the face. After all, he could die if he messed up this time. Leaving the panic behind, the blonde pulled himself together and helped him through the floor. In any case, he was unable to prove himself, but the master still added him to the list of favorites. Apparently, he will survive. Following the best subordinate, it seems that the second has grown up. The main character would argue with how Jenna named herself, since technically the subordinate was Ceres of Niflheim. 5 team members, 1 6-star level 99, wielding 5 divine weapons that Loki created himself and several ultimate abilities. The guy did not rule out that one day he would meet them while climbing the tower, and since this is an idle game, the apprentice Ceres will do just fine on her own, with Yurnet as a backup. Now the main character was thinking about the fact that these guys really weren't artificial. In the meantime, Ceres was going to use every second to take care of the investigation. The girl relied on Yurnet in other matters. When she conveyed information about the whereabouts of the master, the whatever residence has been upgraded to the 2nd level, and the cafeteria in the satellite building has finally been completed. Training grounds have been improved, and training efficiency has increased. The armory, forge, and woodworking shop were combined. Khan noted that the master was a little generous, although he had no choice, since the fun was supposed to begin right now. Thanks to the heroes' reactions and battles, the owner should have felt that they were not just a collection of zeros and ones, but real people. He could not help but feel this, since he himself was a real person. As the characters defended the floors, the waiting room was capable of upgrade. Apparently, the master watched the battles quite often and could afford to donate from time to time. However, it was better than some penniless master's student. Choose Me was not. Like other games, it had almost no events that made obtaining missions so easy. The amount of free gems was definitely appreciated. This time the master began summoning 10 heroes. The guys finished inspecting the building, so now they had to greet the guests. There were 2 methods of summoning: regular, using gold, and premium, using gems. Of course, calls using premium currency were much more effective. The newcomers did not see the difference between reality and dream, so Han had no intention of being nice to them. He was going to tell the nuances only to those who survived on their own and knew how to control themselves. Izel asked the group if there was a carpenter among them. Then she looked for blacksmiths, tanners, and cooks, without giving the slightest explanation. Some even called it a tiny thing. However, this little girl skillfully distributed the work. The waiting room system was changing rapidly.